The galactic interspecies veterinary nexus was, by any metric, the pinnacle of healing. It floated in the serene vacuum of a negotiated neutral zone, a shimmering bauble of sterile corridors, zero-gravity surgical suites, and habitat-specific recovery wards that catered to everything from silicon-based lithivores to gaseous sentience. And at its very core, processing it all with an ego the size of a small moon, was Dr. Xyler. His species, the cephalopodians, were renowned for their intellect, a reputation Xyler embodied with every ripple of his gelatinous, multi-lobed form. He currently hovered in his personal transport disk, 3 of his 7 eyes focused on a flickering containment field, the other for simultaneously reviewing biotelemetry, security protocols, and his lunch order. Within the containment field, a nightmare thrashed. It was a gravestalker from the high-gravity world of Creve, a planet where the flora was more aggressive than most species' fauna. The creature was a symphony of lethality, 6 powerful limbs tipped with obsidian-like claws, a segmented carapace that could deflect low-yield plasma fire, and a tail that whipped back and forth like a biomechanical bullwhip. It was also, at the moment, bleeding from a nasty gash on its flank, courtesy of a rival during a territorial dispute that had ended with it being scooped up by a xenobiology team and brought here. It roared, a sound like grinding rock plates, and slammed against the shimmering blue wall of the energy field, causing the entire observation deck to vibrate. "Inadvisable," Xyler murmured, his voice a series of perfectly modulated, resonant chimes. "It is merely expending its remaining energy reserves and exacerbating the tissue damage. Its logic core is clearly offline." Beside him stood Kthar, the Nexus's head of security. Kthar was a Zorn, a species that looked as if a bear in a mountain had decided to have a very large, very hairy child. He had 4 massive arms, each ending in a hand that could crush durasteel plating. His philosophy on problem-solving generally began and ended with the application of overwhelming force. He watched the Gravestalker's rampage with a professional, if slightly bored, expression. "Its logic core isn't the problem, Doctor," Kthar rumbled, his voice a low-frequency growl that vibrated in the chest cavity. "Its everything core is the problem. It wants to kill the shiny blue wall. Then it wants to kill us. In that order." "A rudimentary assessment, but not entirely inaccurate," Xyler conceded, one eye swiveling to give Kthar a look of intellectual pity. "The issue is that we cannot lower the field to administer sedatives while it is in this agitated state. The standard neurodampeners in the field's emitter are proving ineffective, likely due to its unique cortical shielding. So we can't calm it down," Kthar summarized, cracking the knuckles on his lower left hand. The sound was like small asteroids colliding. "My teams are on standby. We can use concussive charges to disable it, but you're not going to like the potential for collateral neurological damage. Lethal or near-lethal intervention is unacceptable, Chief," Xyler chimed, a slight edge of annoyance entering his tone. "I am a healer, not a butcher. There must be a solution that does not involve treating the patient like a structural demolition project." They fell into a tense silence, the only sounds the hum of the station, the fizz and crackle of the straining containment field, and the furious, guttural roaring of the creature within. It was a standoff between intellect and instinct, with a very angry, very sharp patient caught in the middle. The Gravestalker was, for all intents and purposes, the apex predator of its known world, a perfect killing machine. Here, it was just a terrified, injured animal, and no one knew how to reach it. It was into this tableau of high-stakes veterinary drama that the human walked. His name was Jake, and he was about as threatening as a damp towel. He wore soft, faded blue leg coverings made of some primitive plant fiber and a thin torso sheath that depicted a stylized cartoon skeleton playing a stringed instrument. He was bipedal, bilaterally symmetrical, and possessed a distressingly small number of limbs. His face was mostly soft tissue, with weak-looking mandibles and forward-facing, unprotected optics. By galactic standards, he was a walking buffet. He paused at the entrance to the observation deck, taking in the scene with a mild, slightly apologetic curiosity. A blinking red light above the doorway indicated a Level 3 biohazard containment failure was in progress, a situation that would send most species into a panic. Jake just seemed vaguely concerned he was interrupting something. Kthar was the first to notice him. The Zorn security chief turned, his sheer bulk eclipsing the doorway. "This is a restricted area," he growled, the sound carrying an implicit threat of immediate and violent relocation. Jake gave a small, disarming smile. "Oh, sorry. The front desk was empty and the little light over the door here was green a second ago. I was just supposed to pick up some dander suppressant powder for my fuzzball." Dr. Zyler's transport disc floated over. 3 of his eyes focused on Jake, cataloging his frail-looking form. A human. Species designation, Homo sapiens. Planet of origin, Terra, colloquially known as Earth. A Class 7 death world, which sounded impressive until you read the fine print. The reports stated they were fragile, short-lived, and had a bizarre obsession with adopting and caring for lesser creatures, a trait seen as a profound evolutionary flaw. They were considered a galactic oddity, a species that had stumbled into space not through conquest or intellectual supremacy, but apparently through sheer, inexplicable stubbornness. "Human," Zyler stated, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your timing is, to use one of your own primitive expressions, suboptimal. We are occupied with a matter of genuine importance." "Yeah, I can see that," Jake said, his eyes glancing at the thrashing gravestalker. He didn't look scared. He looked interested, like a mechanic diagnosing a weird engine noise. "Big fella, isn't he? What's the problem?" Thar let out a snort of derisive amusement. "The problem is a Category 5 predator that can liquefy your internal organs with a single swipe. The problem is that this is not a place for soft-skinned curiosities." Right. Professional courtesy." Jake nodded, holding up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'll just, wait over by the nutrient paste dispenser. Don't want to get in the way of all the genuine importance." He shuffled over to a quiet corner, keeping a respectful distance. Zyler dismissed him from his primary thoughts, returning his full attention to the gravestalker. The creature, as if sensing the renewed focus, let out a particularly furious shriek and charged the barrier again. This time, there was a loud crackle and a shower of sparks. The blue shimmer of the field flickered violently, and a siren began to blare, a high-pitched, incessant wail. "Field integrity at 40%, a synthesized voice announced from the ceiling. "Primary emitter is overloading." Thar's posture changed instantly. All 4 of his arms uncrossed, his muscles tensing. "That's it. We're out of time, Doctor. My team is moving in." "Negative, Chief," Zyler warbled, his placid exterior finally cracking. Several of his eyes were blinking rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. "You will fracture its carapace and likely cause fatal internal bleeding. I forbid it. And I forbid that thing from getting loose on my station." Thar roared back, his voice shaking the deck plating. "It'll tear through 3 levels before we can stop it. That's a risk I won't take." The air was thick with their conflicting directives. The intellectual, bound by his oath to preserve life, was unable to act. The warrior, bound by his duty to preserve order, was about to be forced to take it. The gravestalker, meanwhile, seemed to sense the faltering of the barrier. It backed away, gathering its powerful legs beneath it for another, possibly final, charge. The field was now visibly failing, great swathes of it dissolving into static before snapping back into existence. "Containment failure imminent. Evacuate. Evacuate." It was in this cacophony of impending doom that a quiet voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me." Zyler and Kthar both turned. Jake was standing a few feet away, a thoughtful frown on his soft face. He had one hand rubbing his chin, an oddly casual posture for someone in a room with a failing monster cage. "What is it, human?" Zyler demanded, his patience utterly evaporated. "Can you not comprehend the severity of this situation?" "Oh, I get it. It's serious," Jake said calmly. "But you're both wrong about him." He gestured with his chin towards the gravestalker. "He's not angry. He's terrified." Kthar stared at the human as if he had just sprouted a second head that was singing opera. "Terrified? Did you not see the part where it tried to dismantle a military-grade energy field with its face?" "Yeah, that's kind of the point," Jake replied, his tone like he was explaining something obvious to a child. "Look at its quills. See how they're pressed flat against its back? If it were posturing for a fight, trying to look big and scary, they'd be flared out. That's a universal sign for, I am a big threat, do not mess with me. But this," he pointed, "this is, I am trying to make myself a smaller target. Please, dear God, leave me alone." Xyler's 7 eyes all focused on the creature's carapace. The human was right. The rows of otherwise intimidating spines were slicked back, pressed so tight they were almost invisible against the creature's chitinous plates. It was a detail his 1,000-credit scanners had registered, but his intellect had dismissed as irrelevant data. "And listen to the sound," Jake continued. "That high-pitched screaming? That's not a war cry. That's a distress call. He's cornered, he's hurt, and he's in a place that smells and sounds all wrong. He's like a badger caught in a have-a-heart trap. He's not trying to kill you. He's trying to get out." A heavy silence fell over the observation deck, broken only by the whimpering siren and the gravestalker's ragged, panicked breathing. Thar and Xyler exchanged a look of profound confusion. The analysis was so simple, so behavioral. It completely bypassed all of their technological and biological assumptions. "Also," Jake added, "that humming noise from the containment field, it's probably driving him insane. It's got this high-frequency buzz to it. To a creature with sensitive hearing, it's probably like listening to nails on a chalkboard inside a feedback loop. The frequency is calibrated to disrupt synaptic pathways, to act as a pacifier," Xyler stated, a defensive chime in his voice. "Well, it's not working, is it?" Jake said, not unkindly. "Sometimes you just gotta try turning it off and on again. Or, in this case, just turning it down." He shrugged. "Maybe dim the lights too. Big, bright, open spaces are scary for prey animals." Thar looked at Xyler. The doctor's gelatinous form seemed to be processing an impossible amount of conflicting information. On one hand, this was a primitive, soft-shelled mammal offering advice that contradicted decades of xenological theory. On the other hand, their own methods were moments away from catastrophic failure. "Field integrity at 25%, the computer announced calmly. The gravestalker lowered its head, its powerful leg muscles coiling like immense springs. It was gathering for the final push. "Do it," Thar growled at Xyler. "What have we got to lose?" With a hesitant ripple of his body, Xyler transmitted a command. "Engineering, reduce containment field sonic output by 90%, and dim the observation deck lighting to ambient levels." The effect was immediate and startling. The aggressive, high-pitched hum dropped to a barely audible thrum. The harsh overhead lights faded to a gentle, twilight glow. The change was so sudden it felt like the station itself had let out a long, slow breath. And the gravestalker stopped. It froze mid-crouch, its head cocked. The frantic, terrified energy seemed to drain out of it. It took a hesitant step, then another, its claws clicking softly on the deck. It was still tense, still wary, but the blind, suicidal panic was gone. It let out a low, questioning chuff, a sound worlds away from the rock-grinding roars of before. Thar and Xyler were speechless. They stared, dumbfounded, as the most dangerous creature they had ever housed in this facility went from a living demolition ball to a cautious, confused animal in the span of 5 seconds. All because a human told them to flick a switch. "See," Jake said softly. He just needed a minute to think. Then he did something that caused Dr. Xyler's 3 primary brains to nearly short-circuit. He stepped past the crimson safety line painted on the floor. "Human, halt!" Thar bellowed, his voice a thunderclap of alarm. He reached out a massive hand to snatch Jake back. "The field is still failing. Are you insane?" "Just a bit," Jake said, not looking back. "But I've dealt with worse." He kept walking, slowly, deliberately, into the wide open space between the safety line and the flickering containment field. He didn't walk towards the gravestalker. He walked parallel to it, showing it his side, his unprotected, vulnerable flank. An invitation. A gesture of non-aggression so profound and so alien to their way of thinking that Thar froze, his hand hovering in the air. Xyler, in a moment of pure, unadulterated scientific curiosity, put a tentacle on the Zorn's arm. "Wait," he chimed, his voice barely a whisper. "Let us observe." Jake stopped about 15 feet from the creature. He slowly lowered himself to one knee, a gesture that made him seem even smaller, even less of a threat. The gravestalker watched his every move, its multifaceted eyes tracking him with an unnerving intensity. It was still a coiled spring of potential violence, a single wrong move away from tearing the human limb from limb. And then Jake started to speak. His voice was low, rhythmic, and soothing. The words were in his own language, meaningless to the aliens, but the tone was universal. It was the sound of calm, of reassurance. It was the sound one being makes to another to say, "I am not here to hurt you." "Easy, buddy," Jake murmured, his voice barely carrying across the deck. "It's okay. I know it's loud, and it's bright, and it smells all wrong. But we're going to get you sorted out. Just take it easy." The Gravestalker let out another low rumble. It was still a sound of warning, but it lacked the sharp edge of fear. It was a question. Jake held out a hand, palm open and facing downwards. Not a gesture of dominance, but of offering. An ancient, primal peace sign. "It's all right. You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you." The creature took a hesitant step forward. Its massive, clawed head, a thing of terrifying angles and sharpened edges, lowered slightly. It sniffed the air, its sensory organs sampling the strange new scent of the human. It could smell the faded plant fiber of his clothes, the faint trace of the synthetic nutrient paste he'd been standing near, and beneath it all, the warm, living scent of the man himself. There was no spike of adrenaline, no acrid tang of fear. Only a steady, rhythmic pulse and a scent of utter, inexplicable calm. To Kthar, this was madness. He had seen warriors of his own kind, beings bred for courage, break and flee from a creature a tenth as intimidating. Yet this human, this fragile, breakable thing, was kneeling before it, offering a hand to be bitten off. The Gravestalker took another step. It was now close enough to strike, close enough to end Jake's life in a single, brutal motion. Its head swayed. Its massive jaws, capable of shearing through rock, were inches from Jake's exposed hand. And it nudged him. A gentle, almost delicate push of its snout against Jake's palm. It was a gesture of such tentative trust that it seemed to defy the laws of physics. The apex predator, the nigh unstoppable killing machine, was asking for comfort. Jake didn't flinch. He didn't pull back. He simply smiled, a small, sad smile. "There you go," he whispered. "See? Not so bad." Slowly, carefully, he moved his hand, turning it to gently stroke the side of the creature's massive head, his fingers tracing the line of its jaw. The Gravestalker's segmented armor plates were like rough stone, but under Jake's touch, the creature seemed to relax even further. It let out a low, throaty purr, a sound like a small engine turning over. Jake's eyes scanned its body, and he saw the gash on its flank, still weeping a dark, viscous fluid. "Okay, let's have a look at what they did to you," he said softly. He began to move his hand along the creature's side, slowly, towards the wound. The Gravestalker tensed, a low growl starting in its chest. "Easy, easy," Jake soothed. "I know it hurts. I'm just gonna look. I won't touch it. Promise." His hand hovered over the wound. The creature watched him, its breathing still heavy, but it didn't pull away. It allowed the inspection. On the observation deck, Dr. Zeiler felt a sensation akin to several of his brains trying to melt and flow out of his auditory canals. He was witnessing a complete violation of every known principle of predator-prey interaction. Kthar was simply frozen, his four arms hanging limp at his sides. The primal part of his warrior brain was screaming that this was impossible, while the logical part was replaying the event, trying and failing to find the trick. There was no trick. There was only the human, and the monster, and a moment of impossible peace. "Okay," Jake called out, not taking his eyes off the Gravestalker. "Doctor, you can bring the field down all the way." He's calm. "But you need to get a mobile scanner and a wide dispersal hypospray over here. The wound is starting to show signs of necrotic infection. You'll want a broad-spectrum antibiotic and a coagulant." Zeiler, jolted out of his stupor, immediately began issuing orders. His voice, usually so smooth and resonant, was a series of clipped, shocked chimes. The containment field dissolved with a final fizzle. Medical drones and two trembling assistants in full hazard suits approached, armed with the equipment Jake had requested. The Gravestalker tensed at their approach, but Jake never stopped his soft murmuring, his hand never leaving its side. "It's okay, they're just here to help," he crooned. "They're gonna make the OE feel better. Just hold still." And the monster did. It stood perfectly still as the drone scanned its wound, and the hypospray hissed against its flank, delivering the medicine. It flinched, but it did not attack. It trusted the human. An hour later, The gravestalker was resting comfortably in a darkened, quiet recovery ward, a slow drip of nutrients and sedatives feeding into its system. The crisis was over. The station was safe. The patient was stable. And Dr. Zyler and Chief Thar were cornering Jake by the nutrient paste dispenser. "Explain," Zyler demanded. It was not a request. His 7 eyes were fixed on Jake with an intensity that could peel paint. Thar stood behind him, his massive arms crossed. His usual expression of bored superiority was gone, replaced by one of deep, unsettling confusion. He looked at Jake not as an inferior, but as an anomaly, a glitch in the fabric of the universe that he desperately needed to understand. Jake, for his part, was holding a small container of white powder. "Oh hey," he said cheerfully. "You found my fuzzball's dander suppressant. Thanks. He gets awfully itchy this time of the orbital cycle." "The human will disregard the fuzzball," Zyler stated, his voice tight. "The human will provide an explanation for the preceding event. You approached a Class 5 predator, agitated and cornered, and you pacified it with vocalizations and tactile contact. This is not a known or recorded methodology. It is, by all accounts, impossible." Jake sighed, leaning against the wall. He looked tired. "It's not impossible. It's just Tuesday, where I come from." He gestured for them to follow him to a small alcove with a viewing window looking out at the starfield. "Look, it's not that complicated. You guys have it all backward." "Backward?" Thar rumbled. "Yeah. You see a big creature with lots of teeth and claws, and you classify it as a threat. An aggressor. A monster," Jake said. "On my world, that's just called wildlife." He took a deep breath. "You have to understand my planet Earth. It's not a nice place. Your databases call it a Class 7 death world. That's a cute, sanitized label. We just call it home." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "We don't have natural armor. We don't have claws. We're not particularly fast. We can't breathe poison or shoot lasers from our eyes. So, when everything around you for millions of years is bigger, faster, and stronger, you don't evolve to be the toughest. You evolve to be the smartest. Intellect is not unique, human," Zyler countered. "My own species has sequenced the genome of thought itself." "I'm not talking about your kind of smart," Jake said, shaking his head. "I'm not talking about math and engineering. I'm talking about a different kind. A sneaky, dirty, practical kind of smart. The kind of smart that lets you figure out what a predator is thinking." He turned to face them. "That gravestalker? Impressive. Scary, even. But on the scale of things I've had to worry about, he's maybe a 6 out of 10. I once had to get a raccoon out of my garage. It was half his size, but twice as clever and 3 times as mean. And it had thumbs." Zyler and Thar just stared. The word raccoon meant nothing to them, but the context was terrifying. "We evolved on a planet where survival wasn't about being the strongest. It was about understanding intent," Jake continued, his voice taking on the patient tone of a teacher. "We had to learn the difference between a bear that's bluff charging to protect its cubs and a bear that's actually decided your lunch. One you stand your ground for, the other you. Well, you hope you're faster than your friend." He chuckled at his own dark joke, which only served to unsettle the aliens further. "Your mistake was you saw a predator. I saw a prey animal having a very bad day. On Earth, the truly dangerous things, the ones you learn to fear unconditionally, they're not the big, loud, scary ones. The big, loud, scary ones are usually just advertising. The ones you have to worry about are the quiet ones. The patient ones." He leaned in, his voice dropping. "The snake that looks like a dead leaf. The spider that hides in your shoe. The shark that bumps you from below, just to see if you're food. We learned to read body language, not because it was a neat trick, but because if you misread a situation, you died. That's the ultimate learning incentive." Dr. Zyler was processing this. His brain, a marvel of biological computation, was cross-referencing this new data with humanity's file. Their weak physiology, their lack of natural weapons, their strange social structures. It was all slotting into a new, horrifying paradigm. They weren't weak. They were specialized. "And that's just the animals," Jake went on, a strange look in his eyes. "That's not even the hard part. For my day job, I'm a kindergarten teacher." Thar tilted his head. "A kindergarten teacher? You instruct your species combat larvae." Jake laughed, a genuine, loud bark of a laugh. "Oh man, you could call them that." "No, I manage a room of 30 young humans." 30 biological chaos engines who have no impulse control, a tenuous grasp on language, and the emotional stability of a quantum particle. They will bite, scream, throw things, and cry, sometimes all at once, for reasons you can never, ever predict. My job is to keep all of them safe, happy, and learning in a confined space for 8 hours a day. It is a constant, unending exercise in psychological de-escalation, strategic distraction, and hostage negotiation. And there's glitter everywhere. He looked from Zyler's stunned face to Kthar's bewildered one. After you've successfully mediated a dispute over a red crayon between two 5-year-olds who are both convinced it's a matter of galactic importance, a 600-pound lizard with a boo-boo on its side is basically a vacation. The pieces clicked into place in Zyler's mind with the force of a physical blow. Humanity hadn't survived their death world by being strong. They had survived by becoming the ultimate behavioral specialists. They weaponized empathy. They turned psychology into a survival tool. Their weakness was the very thing that made them terrifying. They didn't just fight monsters, they understood them. They tamed them. Kthar felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with temperature. He was a warrior. He understood strength, power, and the clean logic of combat. This was something else. This was a power you couldn't fight, a strength you couldn't measure. The human hadn't dominated the Gravestalker. He had befriended it. He had recruited it to his side with nothing but soft words and a calm demeanor. In a real conflict, a human wouldn't just kill you. They might convince your own war beasts to turn on you. You treat survival challenges as recreation, Zyler chimed, the words coming out slowly as he processed a file on human activities. You climb frozen mountains for fun. You jump out of flying vehicles with nothing but a fabric sheet. You willingly swim in oceans filled with creatures like the shark you mentioned. Hey, gotta stay active, Jake shrugged. Besides, being consistently underestimated is our species' greatest strategic advantage. Nobody ever sees us coming. He pushed off the wall, holding up the container of powder. Well, it's been a slice, but I really should get this back to Bartholomew. He's a Persian, you know, and if his fur gets matted, he gets terribly grumpy. He started to walk away, then paused and looked back at the two stunned aliens. Oh, and doctor, he said, next time you get a patient like that, try playing some classical music. Something by Bach, maybe. Works wonders on the preschoolers during nap time. And with that, he was gone, his footsteps silent in the corridor, leaving behind two of the most powerful and intelligent beings on the station in a state of complete and utter existential crisis. Zyler's transport disk whirred as he turned to Kthar. His 7 eyes were wide with a dawning horror and a terrible, profound respect. Reclassify them, Zyler chimed, his voice trembling with the weight of his realization. Reclassify humanity. Immediately, Kthar just nodded, his throat suddenly dry. To what? What classification even fits them? Zyler stared down the empty corridor where the deceptively average human had disappeared. Apex empath, he whispered. Persistence predators who hunt with psychology. And Kthar, update all station protocols. Under no circumstances is a human ever to be allowed into a containment cell with a cornered animal. Kthar looked at him, confused. Why? The human just proved it's the safest possible course of action. Zyler's form shimmered, a visual representation of a deep, soul-shaking shudder. Because you are thinking like a Zorn, the doctor said. You saw a rescue. I saw something far more dangerous. I saw a recruitment.